Susanna Moodie and Parr Traill are two of Canada's most important 19th century writers. Born in England only 23 months apart, the two sisters became professional writers before they married. In 1832, they emigrated with their Scottish husbands to Canada, settling in the backwoods of what is now Ontario near present-day Lakefield. They recorded and interpreted their experiences as pioneers in books for which they remain famous for to this day. For example, Parr Traill's The Backwoods of Canada, written in 1836, and Susanna Moodie's Roughing It in the Bush in 1852. These women wrote an emigrant's guide for British people looking to move to Canada. Moodie wrote of the trials and tribulations she found as a new Canadian, rather than the advantages to be had in the colony. She claimed that her intention was not to discourage immigrants, but to prepare people like herself, raised in relative wealth and with no prior experience as farmers, for what life in Canada would be like. These women are known as the forefathers of Canadian women's writing, and they continue to live and write in Canada until their deaths.
Our fine crop shared the fate of all other fine crops in the country. It was totally spoiled. The wheat grew in the sheaf, and we could scarcely save enough to supply us with bad, sticky bread. The rest was exchanged at the distillery for whiskey, which was the only produce which could be obtained for it. The storekeepers would not look at it, nor give either money or goods for such a damaged article. My husband and I worked hard in the field. It was the first time I had ever tried my hand at field labor, but our ready money was exhausted, and the steamboat stock had not paid us 1 farthing. We could not hire, and there was no help for it. I had a hard struggle with my pride before I would consent to render the least assistance on the farm, but reflection convinced me that I was wrong. Ah, glorious poverty! Thou art a hard taskmaster, but in thy soul-ennobling school I have received more godlike lessons, have learned more sublime truths than ever I acquired in the smooth highways of the world.
Our society is mostly military or naval, so that we meet on equal grounds and are, of course, well acquainted with the rules of good breeding and polite life, too much so to allow any deviation from those laws that good taste, good sense, and good feeling have established among persons of our class. Yet here it is considered by no means derogatory for the wife of an officer or gentleman to assist in the work of the house or to perform its entire duties, if occasion requires it, to understand the mystery of soap, candle, and sugar making, to make bread, butter, and cheese, or even to milk her own cows, to knit and spin, and prepare the wool for the loom.
Milk, bread, and potatoes during the summer became our chief, and often, for months, our only fare. As to tea and sugar, they were luxuries we would not think of, although I missed the tea very much. We rang the changes upon peppermint and sage, taking the one herb at our breakfast, the other at our tea, until I found an excellent substitute for both in the root of the dandelion. The plant being of a sulphuric nature, the coffee made from it when drunk at night produces a tendency to sleep, instead of exciting wakefulness, and may be safely used as a cheap and wholesome substitute. Without saying anything to my husband, I threw aside some of the roots, and when we left work, collecting a sufficient quantity for the experiment, I carefully washed the roots quite clean, without depriving them of the fine brown skin which covers them, and which contains the aromatic flavor, which so nearly resembles coffee that it is difficult to distinguish it from while it's roasting. I cut my roots into small pieces, the size of a kidney bean, and roasted them on an iron baking pan in the stove oven until they were as brown and crisp as coffee. I then ground and transferred a small cupful of the powder to the coffee pot, pouring upon it scalding water, and boiling it for a few minutes briskly over the fire. The result was beyond my expectations. The coffee proved excellent, far superior to the common coffee we procured at the stores. To persons residing in the bush, and to whom tea and coffee are very expensive articles of luxury, the knowledge of this valuable property in a plant scattered so abundantly through their fields would prove highly beneficial.
This is the fishing season. Our lakes are famous for salmon trout, whitefish, black bass, and many others. We often see the lighted canoes of the fishermen pass and repass of the dark night before our door. S is considered very skillful as a spearsman and enjoys the sport so much that he seldom misses a night favorable for it. The darker the night and the calmer the water, the better it is for fishing.
It is not my intention to give a regular history of our residence in the bush, but merely to present to my readers such events as may serve to illustrate a life in the woods. A late, cold spring in Canada is generally succeeded by a burning hot summer, and the summer of '34 was the hottest I ever remember. No rain fell upon the earth for many weeks, till nature drooped and withered beneath one bright blaze of sunlight, and the ague and fever in the woods, and the cholera in the large towns and cities spread death and sickness through the country. Every tree that reached the ground opened a wider gap in the dark wood, giving us a broader ray of light and a clearer glimpse of the blue sky. But when the dark cedar swamp fronting the house fell beneath the strokes of the axe, and we got a first view of the lake, my joy was complete. A new and beautiful object was now constantly before me, which gave me the greatest pleasure. By night and day, in sunshine or in storm, water is always the most sublime feature in a landscape, and no view can be truly grand in which it is wanting. From a child it always had the most powerful effect upon my mind, from the great ocean rolling in majesty to the tinkling forest rill, hidden by the flowers and rushes along its banks. Half the solitude of my forest home vanished when the lake unveiled its bright face to the blue heavens, and I saw sun, and moon, and stars, and waving trees reflected there. I would sit for hours at the window as the shades of evening deepened round me, watching the massy foliage of the forest pictured in the waters. Canada, the blessed, the free. With prophetic glance I see visions of thy future glory, giving to the world's great story a page, with mighty meaning fraught that asks a wider range of thought. Borne onward on the wings of time, I trace thy future course sublime, and feel my anxious lot grow bright, while musing on the glorious sight. Yea, my heart leaps up with glee to hail thy noble destiny.
I regret that among my dried plants I could not preserve some specimens of our superb water lilies and irises, but they were too large and too juicy to dry well. As I cannot send you my favorites, I must describe them to you. The first, then, is a magnificent water lily that I have called by way of distinction the Queen of the Lakes, for she sits a crown upon the waters. This magnificent flower is about the size of a moderately large dahlia. It is double to the heart, every row of petals diminishing by degrees in size and gradually deepening in tint from the purest of whites to the brightest lemon color. The buds are very lovely and may be seen below the surface of the water. In different stages of forwardness, from the closely folded bud, wrapped in its olive green color, to the half-brown flower, ready to emerge from its watery prison in all its virgin beauty, expand its snowy blossom to the sun and genteel air. Nor is the beauty of the flower its sole attraction. When folded, it gives out a rich perfume not unlike the smell of fresh lemons. The leaves are so worthy of attention also. At first they are of fine dark green, but as the flower decays, the leaf changes its hue to a vivid crimson. Where a large bed of these lilies grow closely together, they give quite a sanguine appearance to the waters that is distinguishable at some distance. The yellow species of the plant is also very handsome, though it wants the silken texture and delicate color of the former. I call this the water king. Immigration to the New World offered splendid opportunities for both Parr Traill and Susanna Moodie to develop their relationship with the natural environment. In Susanna's case, the exaltation that she experienced on first seeing the astonishing panorama of Quebec City and the St. Lawrence River soon gave way to loneliness and homesickness as she sometimes viewed the landscape as a prison. Such feelings did not prevail, however. Roughing It in the Bush more often reveals such feelings in prose and in poetry. Many of the chapters in the book begin and end with poems celebrating the powerful forces of Canadian nature and the human activity that goes on in its midst. Catherine's pleasant demeanor helped her cope with the difficulties and with accepting the consequences of the move. Life as a pioneer in Canada was difficult. Catherine's relationship with the natural environment was both more constant and more complex than Susanna's. She never ceased to admire the pioneer's heroic struggle to subdue the wild Canadian forest. Many of her stories and essays celebrate this process. At the end of The Backwoods of Canada, she gives voice to the ambition of the settler to transform the rude Canadian landscape into a land of fertile fields and groves of trees planted by the hand of taste. These two women will continue to be studied when looking at our Canadian heritage.